I'm here in Van, Texas today, home of the Van Vandals, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to interview Coach Jared Moffatt. He's been a good friend, and he's done a great job here at Van, and so I'm really excited about today and this opportunity to give you a coach's perspective with Coach Jared Moffatt. All right, Coach. Tell me about yourself. How long you been coaching? A little bit about you.
How long have I been coaching? A long time now. This is 27 years. Seems like an eternity to an extent. Um, when you're young and you're thinking about coaching and just starting out, and you look at the old guys and where they are in their profession, and you're like, man, those guys are real old. They know everybody. You walk through the convention. I used to walk through the convention with Coach Joey Florence, and we couldn't take 5 steps without stopping for him to talk to someone I'd never seen before. And they knew each other. And then we'd go with somebody else. And when you're young, you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
You're just dying to see somebody you know. And now, I'm on the other side of this thing. I'm the old guy that I used to look at. And the guys that I thought were real old at 49, well, that's me. I'm the old guy. So, yeah, I've been in it for a while now. And anyway, I got into coaching. My dad was a coach. My mom taught English. And really, that's the only thing I ever wanted to do. And I'm not sure why. I look back now and wonder, man, are there some other things maybe I should have done or thought about doing, but I didn't. I didn't. This was it. I've got 4 kids. I don't know how many of my 4 boys are going to coach or not, but I tell them all the time, I don't have any regrets. I've loved this profession and what I've gotten to do now for 27 years, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, awesome. The next question is, why did you choose coaching? You've kind of already.
Well, it's funny because you coached for a long time too, and you dealt with kids, and when you're in this profession, and I'll probably refer to Coach Florence a lot. I've obviously been influenced by him. I spent 9 years with him at Denton Ryan, but he always told us, when you're in education, you're in the kid business. That's the actual business that you're in. You deal with kids every single day. So I've thought about this now because kids came through that weren't mine. I watched other people's kids grow up. They graduate from high school, they go to college or whatever it is they do after high school, and you watch them go on. Some kids do really well. Some kids have a plan and they follow that plan. It works out exactly. Some kids have a plan that's not what happens to them, and they end up doing something. And so there's a lot of different paths for kids to take when it's yours. My oldest now is 23, and he's out of college. And so, you're looking at these kids, and man, you want them to find what it is that maybe the Lord has for them, or, something they enjoy doing, or they're passionate about, or, pays the bills, And so, but for me, I never considered doing anything else. And I really don't know why, other than the fact that, well, that seems like something fun. That seems like something I would enjoy doing. And like I said, Dad was a coach, so I grew up in the profession and was always around it. And so for me, it's just that's what I want to do. And as a kid, I always thought, man, I'm going to coach. I'd like to be a head coach. What do I have to do to be a head coach? I need to do those things. And so to be here now, after being a head coach for 15 years, all of them here at Van, again, to look back, I feel really good about that. And I've appreciated the journey to get to where I thought I wanted to be. And like I tell my boys, looking back, I don't have any regrets about my career choices and the things I've done. Because one thing that I know a lot of people will say as they talk to you about this is the rewarding aspect of coaching and the ability to impact so many young people's lives through the profession of coaching.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, what are some things you enjoy about coaching?
Well, we get to coach a game for a living. I mean, come on. That's what we do. We coach a game. And I tell the boys that. I'll refer to my boys a lot too. I got 4 of them. They've all played here for me. And so, but, in this profession, I coach the game of football for a living. And I don't think I ever thought about that when I set out to coach. And obviously when I started, I taught history. for I don't know how many years, but I taught history. And then when I became obviously the head coach, I haven't taught, since I've been here in Van. But, one of the things I enjoy about this is I love the game of football and I love what it represents and the toughness that you have to have and the day in and day out competitiveness of this sport and athletics in general and what it teaches young people. And I get to do that every single day. And there are a lot of people that go into work, I think, every single day that maybe they don't enjoy what they do.
Yeah.
One of my best friends in life works at a bank. He's the president of the bank and regional director. And I remember my son asked him one time, because we went and talked to him. He asked him, my son said, well, do you see yourself doing this till you retire? And he said, I hope not. I thought that was interesting because I do. And, and he makes a great living. He enjoys what he does. But at the same time, he didn't hesitate on his answer with, I hope not.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people, too, that look at what we do for a living and they think, man, if I could have done anything else, I would have liked to have done that. Now, I like to remind those people, well, y'all are seeing Friday night or game night, and you're thinking that you want to do that part of coaching.
Right.
Which is actually a really small part of it.
Yeah.
And you probably never had to clean or see the young guy clean the refrigerator in the team meeting room, and do the laundry and all the things that we as coaches know that go along with this profession and pick kids up and take it home and make sure they got their English homework done or they studied for their history exam or, you and I could start rattling off all of the things, that people do in this profession. But I think there is something about this job that other people, especially that play sports, look at what we do for a living and think, man, I bet that would have been fun. And I think the reality of it is they're right, they're right. And so, when you start like, well, what do you love about coaching? Most of it, you know what I mean? That's the easy part. Most of it. There's not many things that there aren't like about this job. And, like I said, 27 years in, I still enjoy coming to work every day. And honestly, when I think about the boys, that's what I hope they can find. I hope they can find something in their lives and a profession that they can get up every day and enjoy going to work because I still do.
Yeah. Well, what are some things you don't like about coaching?
I think in this profession, the hardest thing about this profession, and it's not gotten easier, is what you make, especially starting out. And not only starting out, because now, you get paid more to start than what's ever been the case. And so because you're getting paid so much more to start, your ceiling's not very high as where you can go in terms of if you just coach and teach, you're a positional coach and you teach. So my dad was. And, what you make in this profession, no one gets into this profession because of what you're going to make. Right. And we all know that. And in fact, I think when you get into this profession, you have to know, hey, this is what I'm going to make in coaching and teaching. And even if I start here as a positional coach, this is what I can make as a coordinator, as a head coach, if I get out of coaching and into the administration part of education.
Yeah.
Because that's the reality.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's reality. And with, home prices, these days and
interest rates,
nothing, as you know about mortgages, nothing has gotten seemingly easier in terms of living on what you make. And so for me, what do you not like about coaching? I'd love for all these guys that work here in Van and around the state of Texas to make more money. When it comes to, I've got kids in college. There's nothing cheap about that, as we know. None of mine are Division I scholarship athletes either, by the way. But outside of that, when you start looking at, well, what do you not like about coaching? Because a lot of people might say, well, the hours, and during the season. And there's truth in that. There is. At the same time, I'm like, yeah, there are a lot of hours, but we're coaching a game, like my long hours consist of watching more film of football, and but the time that it takes, and it takes what it takes. And you have to put the time in to have a chance to be successful. And so I think a lot of people might say the hours, but I'm like, yeah, yeah. But, you know, I used to think I'd work smarter as I got older. I think I have to work longer now than I did 10 years ago. I'm not sure what that means about me. Um, I think the hours. And then I do think where we are in high school sports and at the coaching profession is we've turned it into a year-long venture. Um, Used to, even when I was in high school, that was before you could work out kids in the summer. And there was a somewhat of a dead period, so to speak, where the coaches weren't with the kids every single day or 4 days a week or whatever it is all summer long. And I always thought that was valuable time. Now that we're on this side of it where the kids work out most of the summer, and depending on where you are and how you handle it, and some people bring in other people to work their kids out. They're not. At a place like Van, the last thing we want to do is charge our kids to be up here in the summer, and so we don't do that. So we're the ones working them out, and um, I do think it's the time in season may have always been that way. I think we've increased time over the course of the year, um, and I think too, it's not necessarily something that maybe I don't like about coaching. Maybe I don't like where we are. Um, things seem to trickle down to high school sports sometime, and sometimes they move up and things move down. But the aspect of the nature of high school sports with where we are, um, I hope that we don't lose what makes high school sports valuable and important for kids. And the community aspect and growing up somewhere and playing with your buddies and your friends who you've grown up with. And um, seems like there are some instances where we're losing some of that. And I know I read an article the other day um, by Coach Sedberry out of Terrell. It was basically the unofficial transfer portal in high school. And there are some things that worry me about high school sports and about where we might be headed. And I think you know, we might lose some of the things that make high school sports so valuable if we're not careful. And everybody wants to win, and coaches are some of the most competitive people out there. And so, at the same time, though, I do believe there's a bigger picture, and there's what high school sports should be about. And we're not professional sports. We're not Division One. We're not collegiate. Um, every single one of these kids, to my knowledge, aren't making any money, and that's not why they're playing sports. And I think it's important for us to remember that and the values of high school sports. That's what makes it special, and we need to remember that. And the values that our young kids get out of playing high school sports are immeasurable. And if we're not careful, I think we can lose some of that in pursuit of other things.
Yeah.
I think maybe for me that ties into uh, maybe things I'd worry about with high school sports. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. Okay, Coach, what are some guiding principles that you would recommend for a coach to help guide him along his path?
Well, I think first you have to know why you do this. Why do you do this? When I was at Denton Ryan, Coach Florence would usually start the year uh, going around the room. And I say usually at times start the year, but why do you coach? Um, and for a young coach, uh, what's your reason for being in this profession? And we all have to have that why, and why do we do what we do, and why do we make the choices that we make? And um, I think it's easy to identify why we're or the reasons we're not in the profession. Obviously, it starts. Well, I didn't get in this to make money. I didn't get in this to become wealthy. But why are you in this profession? And I think that's the thing. If you can remember why you're doing this, and so for me, obviously it started off what was something I wanted to do because I love the game, and uh, the ability to do something that I enjoyed for a living obviously appealed to me. And the second thing is, I mentioned being in the kid businesses. I tell people that are starting out in their careers here, and I'm interviewing people who are young and just starting in coaching. Do you love kids? Do you love kids? If you don't, this is not for you. Um, if you don't like being around kids, well, this is not the profession for you. I don't care how much you love the sport. The sport is secondary to, but I better love kids. And everyone in this profession who's been in it knows this. The kids know if you love them and you care about them. You ask any kid at any grade, probably, hey, what teacher loves you and cares about you? They'll rattle some off without hesitation. And that goes the same thing for coaches. And as with any profession and in life, there are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be goods and bads. Be a lot of successes. There'll be failure. All those things. But why do you do what you do? And if you understand why you're doing what you're doing, well, that makes everything else easy. And if you're in this profession because first you love kids and you're hoping you can impact kids throughout the course of your career, because you will. You will. Secondly, you got to love kids and you got to love the game. Are you passionate about the game? And so, for me, when I'm trying to find people to hire, and we end up hiring a lot of young kids here, we really do. And I like hiring young kids because I feel like we can mold them and we can turn them into, for good or bad guys that resemble us. But when I find someone who I feel like loves kids and they're passionate about the game and they're going to show up every day and work hard, well, I found someone who can be successful in the profession. Yeah. And we like to make I think we like to make things complicated, and our world likes to complicate things. When in fact, man, you can make things real simple. And there are very few people that have those three characteristics that I've been around in the course of my 27 years who haven't been successful as long as they've kept those things consistent throughout their career.
Excellent. Awesome. Good stuff, Coach. Okay, how do you develop the right culture in your athletic program?
But that word culture, the guys that know me will laugh at this question because I feel the word culture is just hammered. It seems to me to be the answer to every question. You hire a new coach, we got to change the culture, we got to change the culture, we got to fix the culture, we got to establish the culture, we got to culture. Like, I think I could go on and interview and answer every question by saying culture. And I don't downplay it. That's not to downplay the importance. That's not what that is. I just feel like in our world today, that's the answer for everything. And again, to me, it's like, well, I sure think we complicate that. We were talking about the other day, I think Nick Saban said one time, hey, you create a good culture by winning. If you want to have a good culture, win a bunch of games. That's a good start. And I know what he means by that. My thing, like, you just talk about it's who you are. You just culture. We got to do all these things to have great culture. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying those things can't impact or benefit your culture. I'm not saying that at all. But your culture of your organization, of your team, it's just who you are. And so just simply be who you want your culture to be. If me as a head coach and athletic director, if I can embody who I feel like we need to be and the coaches that we hire can embody that, well, then we live out our culture every day by just being who we are and who we think we need to be. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about a positive culture or a good culture, don't most of those all contain the same characteristics? We want our kids to work hard. Well, who doesn't? And what profession do they not need everybody to work hard? And so how do you go about creating that culture? Well, you work hard, and you work hard, the coaches work hard, and then They expect the players to work hard, and then if they weren't working hard over time, if you keep doing that, then they start working hard. Well, we expect toughness. We expect part of our culture. We need toughness. Well, how do you do that? Well, you be tough. And you're tough, and you're physically and mentally tough, and your coaches are physically and mentally tough, and then and I don't know. I don't downplay the word culture. I do not, because I know how important the aspect of culture is to an organization and to a team. I also think that it's a buzzword that people use all the time to encompass every single question. And I think we can overcomplicate it. To me, you be who your culture is. Don't make it any more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Be who your culture is. And I'm old. I'm 49, which is getting older every day, as you know. But I say I'm old because I've lost touch with social media, and I'm not a social media guy. I'm not on it. I need the young guys to do that kind of stuff. But in our world too, if you don't put something on social media, it's like it didn't happen. If I don't post every day that we worked hard in off season, well, we must not have worked hard. Or if I don't post, us, picking up trash somewhere, well, we didn't do it. Or if I don't post, and I don't like that. I don't like that because that's just not who I am, and to me, it goes back to, hey, let's just not worry about posting everything we're doing all the time. How about we just do those things? How about we just be that way, and be that way all the time and be who you are. But this aspect of social media is, well, if I don't post it, no one knows it's happening. And well, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't know everything that's happening. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't need to know everything that's happening. But if you just be who you are, well, it is happening. Just maybe the whole world doesn't know about it, or the whole whatever.
Yeah.
And so, I know I'm on the other side of, I don't know if I would say my career, but I probably am, but in the aspect of the social media world, and pumping out everything you do, to me, it ties in the culture too. I'm like, well, just because you don't post it on social media doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
The people who are most important to the organization, they know what happened. Well, they were there. They know what happened. They were there, and that's why you're doing it. Anyway, well, I took a left turn on that.
No, that's great. That's things I think people need to hear.
Well, if anyone hears that, the guys that know me, they'll laugh.
Yeah.
Before I answer the question, they'll start off laughing. So,
That's awesome. Well, are there things that you stress to your kids every day?
I mean, we all do, and here in Van, I've been fortunate to be here 15 years, and I've learned a lot about this place. Because you know this too, Coach. You've coached at a lot of different places. They're all different. They are. And they're all the same. But they're all different. And so I have learned a lot about the kids in Van and the community of Van over 15 years. And some of the things that make this place special are obviously some of the things that we continue to stress on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I could ask you what those things were, and you'd probably get the list as well because you coached it. But we do stress and talk a lot about toughness. Toughness and mental and physical toughness. And part of the reason is too, one, we do have tough kids. We're fortunate to have a community that is a tough-minded community. And so because of that, kids come into our program with aspect of mental and physical toughness.
Yeah.
We're not trying to turn a bunch of guys who aren't tough into tough guys, because I think that's hard to do. And so, but we talk about that all the time, but this at your age, just like I do at mine. Well, you're going to need mental and physical toughness throughout the course of your life, and things are not always going to go your way. And sometimes you're going to turn the ball over, and sometimes you're going to deal with injuries. And whatever the case may be, you're going to find yourself in the same spot in life, as you know. And how do you respond? How do you respond in those moments when things aren't going your way?
Yeah.
And what we want out of our players and our team in response to those situations is a mental and physical toughness to keep going and to play the next down. We tell them all the time, hey, I can't win the game on the last down, but I can on the next one. And it's just a mindset that, develops over time. But we need our kids to be mentally and physically tough. And so we talk about that all the time. And we value toughness. And what we hope is that when kids leave our program and figure out what they're going to do in life, we know they're going to need mental and physical toughness throughout the course of their life. And so what I hope for these kids is when they hit tough times in their life and things don't go the way in their life and their marriage gets hard or they're having financial problems or having issues at work, fill in the blank, what I hope they can refer back to is the mental and physical toughness that they developed growing up in Van and playing sports here at Van. And they can apply that to their life. And so we, again, I could talk about that for a long time.
Yeah.
But we preach about that, and then we could preach about the competitive nature of sports and life.
Yeah.
We are always competing.
Yeah.
We are always competing. And there's very few moments in your life when you're not. And if you find yourself in a place where you're not competing, well, then you're probably losing because someone else is competing. And so it's just that mindset of, Coach Lawrence told us, and I heard him tell teams countless times over the years, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. You're not staying the same. And I think if you look up and find yourself in a non-competitive environment, you're getting worse. And so this mindset of competition, there's always something that I can do to get better. And that goes for me, the coaches, the players. Hey, we have got to be trying to find ways to constantly get better. And if we don't have a competitive mindset, then you can fall into the complacency of not getting better. And so, I think for us, toughness, competition, and then I say that we tell our kids all the time, there's really one thing we can't work with. We feel like here, and you coached with us, and I was a lot younger then, as you know, but I feel like we can work with just about anything except not being here. And you have to be somewhere. You got to be there. Hey, if you can just be here, we can work with that. We can't work with you not being here.
Right.
Man, I can work with a lot of things, but if you're not here, and the value of showing up every single day and the value of being somewhere when you don't feel like being somewhere. I go back to just being present every day. I've heard Coach Rainey say, I know he probably got this from Eugene Rogers, but your best ability is availability. Being here, just simply showing up every single day. And I was fortunate. I had one of the best dads. I had one of the best dads. Dad passed away a couple of years ago. I was fortunate to have him for 47 years. And I talk a lot about Dad to the players and the teams I coach. So much of who I am is because of my father. But one thing I remember about my father is he got up and went to work every single day. He got up and went to work. And I saw my dad get up and go to work when he was sick. I saw my dad get up and go to work when he didn't feel good and when he didn't want to. And so what I assumed as a young kid and then young adult is that's what everyone did. You get up and you go to work. You have a responsibility to the organization that you work for to get your tail up and go to work every single day. That's what you've committed to. And I assumed everybody was that way. And as I got older and saw people in different professions, I learned real quick, not everyone has that mentality. And I always appreciate that's one of the many things I learned from him. And we try to tell that to our kids too. Hey, you got to be here. Like, there are going to be times that you don't want to get up and go to work. We all have that. And it's even me. I love what I do. Well, yeah, there are times you don't feel good. You don't like, but what do you do in those moments? Well, get your tail up and go to work. Get your tail up and go to work. And these kids, we preach to them about being here every single day. because it's a mindset. Hopefully it'll carry on to their life too.
Yeah.
Again, I said, Coach Florence, I was so fortunate. It's probably in some of these questions, but I was so fortunate to be at Denton Ryan for 9 years. And I said that I tell these guys all the time here, hey, we didn't make any of this up. We didn't make this up. If y'all think I dreamed all this up, I didn't. Almost everything I know about coaching and running a program, I learned there at Denton Ryan with Coach Florence for 9 years. But I don't know if you remember Tavo Lemus. Tavo Lemus played left tackle early in my career, probably second, third year I was here, probably after you just left. He was a sophomore, but
Yeah.
I ran into him at Brookshire's the other day. He was coming out of Brookshire's. I was going in. Tavo's 30. I hadn't seen him in years. And so I stopped to talk to Tavo, asked him how old he was at 30. I couldn't believe it. It's like, you're old. But as we were talking, he said, Coach, I come to almost all the home games, man. I support you guys. I love what you do. He said, but I always, I remember a lot of things that you told us. He said, but one of the things I remember that you always told us is a man does what has to be done, when it has to be done, whether he likes it or not. And I didn't admit to him that I stole that from Coach Lawrence. I didn't make that up. I stole it from Coach Lawrence.
Yeah.
I don't know who Coach Lawrence got it from. Maybe he made it up, but I bet he stole it from somebody else. But he told me that, and I told him, man, I said, Tavo, you made my day.
Yeah.
You made my day because it's just one of those moments with a player. He's 30 years old, and he tells me something that we talked a lot about during his time. And he said, Coach, I do a lot of things I don't want to do.
Yeah.
So for me, it goes back, what are you stressing every day? We all stress things to our kids. I think for us in Van,
Yeah.
Toughness, competitive mentality, and simply being here every day. I think those are some of the main things.
Yeah.
I guess maybe that's our culture.
That's awesome. Okay. What would you recommend? You've kind of already talked about this a little bit, but what would you recommend for a young man or young woman that is going into coaching?
Yeah. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me was working with Coach Florence. I actually started my career in Erie County. It was a small school, 1A then, be 2A now, out in West Texas, just west of San Angelo. My wife was a year behind me in college, and they were looking for a coach, and I applied, got the job. Didn't know one thing about Erie County. Bunch of stories came out of that place. We stayed there 3 years. Well, after the third year, they were making a head coaching change. I was real young, right? My third year, was that right? Third year in coaching, so I was 25, 24, 25 years old. Had a good relationship with the kids, and a lot of the kids wanted the superintendent to hire me as the head coach, which he had no business hiring me as the head coach. I was 25. I didn't think that then. So they interviewed me for the job. They interviewed me and everything. He was my next door neighbor. We lived next door to each other. But he interviewed me for the job, and he told me later at the end of the deal, we're going to hire somebody else. So-and-so. Of course, I didn't appreciate that. I told him, I said, well, I'm going to leave. I didn't feel like you should stay. If you try to get the head coaching job, don't get it. You need to go. You need to go. So anyway, I told him I was going to leave, but I remember him. He told me two things that I remember, maybe more, but specifically in those moments. One was when I told him I was going to leave, he said, well, we're not going to put dirt in your gas tank. I'm like, well, I don't think that's a compliment. But I know what he meant, but he also said, this is what you need to do. He said, I could hire you for this job. He said, you need to go get under someone that knows what they're doing.
Right.
And learn how to do this job. And he said, man, you're gonna have a great career. You will be a head coach. I just don't think now's the time. You need to get somewhere under somebody and learn how to do this job.
Yeah.
And how right he was.
Yeah.
How right he actually was.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I knew Coach Florence. Coach Florence coached in Sulphur Springs. That's where he started his career. I was in the 8th grade. He likes to bring up how terrible our 8th grade basketball team was, because it was. He probably says I was the worst player on the team. Maybe I was. But I'd known him from that. He worked with my dad. So for me to be able to get on, he had just gotten to Denton Ryan, going in his second year. So I started at the junior high. My first year was at the junior high. But I spent 9 years with Coach Florence at Denton Ryan. And as I previously mentioned, it's, most of what we do here, I learned there.
Yeah.
I didn't have to invent any of this.
Yeah.
I was able to learn it all and then implement it. And of course, we do some things that are different here in Van that we didn't do at Ryan, and we've changed over the years. But the blueprint for success that we use here came from there, and it came from my 9 years of being there. So I've lost the question, but in terms of a young coach going into the profession,
Yeah.
man, the invaluable experience you can get by being at a place that knows what they're doing. Learn something.
Yeah.
Learn something. And, you know, if you can get on somewhere and coach for a great defensive staff and learn the defense, man, you've created a tremendous amount of value for yourself.
Yeah.
Because you can put that in. I talk to these young guys, hey, learn the weight room while you're here. Learn what we're doing and why we're doing it and when we do it and the programs that we use. Learn that while you're here. It makes you valuable in your next job because you'll be surprised that you'll go someplace and half those guys don't know anything about what they're in the weight room. They just do what they're told. And so for a young coach, you have to be in a place where you can create value for yourself. And to create value for yourself, you have to be surrounded by people who can pour into you and that you can learn from.
Yeah.
And I think all of us at this point of our profession, they've been doing it a long time, can point back to those specific people and coaches and programs in our lives
Absolutely.
that poured into us. And we're so much of the coaches that we are because of them.
Yeah.
And so now that's what we are.
Yeah.
You know, Scott Reynolds is the offensive coordinator at Waxahachie. He coached here for 9 years. And the coaches here and I take a lot of great pride in what he's accomplishing.
Sure.
Because he learned so much of that here with us.
Yeah.
And for him to be able to go on and find success on the biggest stage in one of the most competitive 6A districts in the state, if not the most, we take a lot of pride in him and what he's doing and his success. And so that's my advice, the most important advice to a young coach. Man, you better get somewhere that knows what they're doing, that you can learn from. Because the faster you do that, the faster you can actually create value for yourself on someone else's staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Coach, what are some of the ways you can help a student athlete be successful in life?
Man, I feel like if you knew the full answer to that, you could write a book and make a lot of money. You know, and there's so many ways. Kids are so different. You know, kids are so different, and people forget that. It's amazing to me how many times we forget that kids are different. You know, we should treat them all the same, you know, which has always been interesting to me. And like I said, a lot of my philosophy comes from Coach Florence. I'm sure I remember him saying at some point in time, well, they're not all the same. Why would we treat them all the same? That doesn't even make sense. No, like we don't teach them all the same.
Right.
You know, anyway, you know, but for kids, you know, how do you help make them successful in life? Well, you know, how can we pour into them and help build a strong foundation for the things that they will need to do to be successful in life? And it goes back to, you know, what are we trying to teach here? You know, and I talked about being tough and being competitive and being here every single day. You know, man, if you could just do those things, you know, if you can just do those things, you got a shot.
Yeah.
And the problem, and you know this too, the problem with, you see so many people in life when it gets hard that they quit. I'm going to do something else. I'm done with this. I'm going to do this. You know, and how many stories are there about the people who persevered and they found success because they persevered? And so for us, we're trying to help kids be successful in life. Man, how can we pour into them and help teach them the traits that they're going to have and rely on to be successful in life?
Yeah.
You know, can you show up every day for work?
Yeah.
Whether you want to or not, can you show up every day? Yeah. Can you respond in a positive way when things aren't going your way?
Yeah.
When things are tough?
Yeah.
You know, again, I always say, like, man, we want to make things difficult. I don't think things are that difficult. I think sometimes we want to make them difficult because the simple things might be hard. You know, can you just do those things? I heard Coach Rainey say the other day, Jared Rainey's our defensive coordinator, we coached there for 20 years. I think he was talking about Dana White telling his kids, man, if you just got a little bit of savage of you, there's a little bit of savage inside of you, man, you'll be successful. I don't think those were his exact words. Probably can't say him on this dude. But the deal's like, man, if you can just have you know, refusal to quit, you know, to persevere, to persist, to move forward when other people stop. If you can just do those things, I don't care what line of work you're in, you can find success. And the level of success obviously will be different, right? We all know that. But man, you can find success and be successful. And hopefully, when it go back to impact, hopefully that they see that in here with us on a small scale. You know, we always say, and you said this too, I know, you know, the life lessons you're learning in sports and football in particular are going to come into play throughout the rest of your life.
Right.
If you can learn those things and apply them here in what we're doing on the small scale of football, and take that out and apply it to your life when you're 30. Tavo Lemus, Coach, I do a lot of things I don't want to do every day, but you used to tell me a man does what has to be done when it has to be done, whether he likes it or not. That's why he made my day.
Yeah, right.
That's why he made my day. I'm
Absolutely.
like, man, you're well on your way to being successful. If you can do that and show up every day, well, what's left? You know, if you can compete while you're there, what's left? You know, so we make it complicated. But man, I don't think it's that complicated. So if we can teach those kids and give them a foundation,
Yeah.
hopefully they can fall back on their experiences of playing sports and the things that happened to them here. Man, maybe they can apply it to their life and find success there too.
Awesome. Coach, the next question, I think I'm going to tie these two together. One of them is, what does success look like? How do you define success? Then there's another question is how important is winning in this profession? So maybe if you could kind of answer both.
Sure. Well, I'll start with the winning because winning is extremely important in this profession. And you know that, and everyone that coaches know that. You know, Coach Lawrence, I remember him telling me one time about the platform you have as a coach to influence people's lives and to influence young kids, and how important that platform is. But I'll never forget, he told me real fast, if you don't win enough games, you'll lose that platform because they'll try to hire somebody that's going to win more games than you're winning.
Yeah.
So, hey, winning is important. And depending on where you are, you know, how much you have to win changes. And so you have to find ways. Again, this is a competitive environment. You know, no one coaches with the mindset of being average. No one starts off the season, you know, man, boy, it'd be great if we were 3-7 this year. You know, no one starts with that mind, and you have to win games. If you don't win enough games in this profession, you'll ultimately be looking for a job. And, you know, people always say that, well, coach, that's not always true, you know, and how you treat the kids and the impact that you have on them and, you know, all these things. And I'm like, all those things are true. But if you don't win enough games over time, they're going to replace you and try to find someone who's going to win more games. And that's the nature of it. And you've seen it, and so have I. I've seen some really good people change jobs because they didn't win enough games. And you have to.
Sure.
And so you have to, you got to find ways to win.
Yeah.
And so now, you know, Coach Florence also said many times, you know, what's your job as a coach? Well, win the games you're supposed to win and give your kids a chance to win the ones you're not. Now, it's always made sense to me.
Yeah.
And so you better win the games you're supposed to win. And then how do you find your kids? How do you give them a chance to win the ones maybe you're not supposed to win? And like I said, and you know this too, that's different everywhere. You know, I said, you know,
Sure.
so many places are the same and so many places are different. And so you've got to win games. And, you know, if you lose enough games, they're gonna move on from you. I don't really want to get fired. So I want to win as many games as I need to win so I can get fired. That's the first thing. You know, then success, you know, people look at success so many different ways.
Yeah.
But I think they're all connected too. Like I said, you have to win. You have, you know, but you will know this too. Sometimes in a season that had one of your worst records, you maybe did your best job coaching.
Right. Right.
You know, you maybe did your best job coaching. You had a lot of injuries to overcome. Things happened to you that were unfortunate. And you kept battling. You kept finding solutions to your problems, and you kept replacing players. And you thought you did a great job coaching, and you were 3-7, or you were whatever the case may be.
Right.
And now the reality of that is, while you can find success in that season, no one else cares. They just care that you were 3-7. That's all you have to win. So that success deal is, but it's so hard for me to define because there's so many levels of it. And, at the end of the day, what did, I'm not good with quotes. What John would say about success one time, it's, doing the absolute best you can, in the moment with what you have, or, that's completely inaccurate. Something along those lines. And I think for us in this profession is, you have to tie that into your success. Um, you know, did we do the best we could with these players and coaches? Did we get everything we have out of these players and this staff and this team? Hopefully, you can look back and not have a lot of regrets about the things you didn't do, and the solutions that you found to your problems. All that ties into your success too. What type of impact did you make on the players that were part of your team?
Right.
What type of impact did you make on the players that were part of your program? I would say one of the worst years here. Man, it was so unfortunate. It was Jayton's, my oldest son's senior year. We were 6-4, and we were in a tough district. We lost to Carthage, Kilgore, and Henderson in district. Finished 6-4 in the season. We tied for, I guess there's like a 3-way tie for third and fourth, whatever. We lost on points. Didn't make the playoffs. Only year we had made the playoffs. Just happened to be my son's senior year, which was no fun. No fun at all.
Yeah.
And so our slogan that year was next to him. It came out of Nehemiah when they were rebuilding the wall, and it just talked about the defense of the wall. And, we pulled it from, the verse that's talking about, and next to him was so-and-so, and next to him was so-and-so, and next to him. And the mentality of, hey, we're all next to somebody that depends on us. And I remember Reeve Hughes was talking about the season after it was over. Maybe it was on the sports banquet, or maybe it was on his top 10% banquet or whatever. But I remember him talking about the next to him aspect of the season. And so, our season was unsuccessful. We didn't make the playoffs. We were 6-4 and didn't make the playoffs. But you can't lose that aspect of success as well. The impact that you made on the players, even on the seasons that aren't as successful as you would like. So there's a lot of different levels of success.
Yeah.
But I tie it to the first question of winning.
Yeah.
Because if you don't win enough, you're going to have to find another job.
Yeah. All right. Coach, how important is faith in our profession, faith in your coaches, faith in your players, faith in others, faith in God? Just what do you think about any of that?
Well, how important is it in all of our lives? Things are going to happen in life that you don't appreciate and that you don't understand. I told this to you earlier, just me and you talking. 27 years in, 49 years old. Sometimes I feel like I know less now than what I did at 35. But I do know this, and you do too. Things are going to happen in your life that you don't appreciate and don't understand. And what do you fall back on when those things happen? Anybody, when things are going good, well, anybody can do that. It's like our seasons. When we're winning games and we haven't lost, well, it's easy to fill in the blank. All those things are easy. Well, what do you do when you're 0-5 to start the season? We've been 0-5 to start the season. What do you do then? And so in our life, I've always found it difficult to understand how people face those situations when they don't have a foundation of, Christianity and what they believe in and who they are. One of the things I know about Christianity and my beliefs is that, God's got a plan for us. He's got a plan. I do think we're part of that plan, and we have choices to make throughout the course of that plan. But he does have a plan for us. And it's not always the plan that we want. And it's definitely not always the plan that we understand. And all of us who are in our late 40s, maybe beyond, could say the same thing about our lives. And so many times when those things happen in our life, we don't understand it. And sometimes it may take years for us to look back and to get a sense of maybe what was going on. I always refer back to, you know, Joseph and David. You know, David was anointed king of Israel at a really young age. And the time from when he got anointed to the time he became king, those weren't the best of times.
No,
They were not the best of times. And you wouldn't want to know, and he was running around caves and King Saul was trying to kill him, and a lot of times he was questioning what's going on,
Yeah.
you know. And then Joseph as well. Joseph had the dreams,
Yeah.
of what things were going to be like. Then he was sold into slavery, and then he was a slave, and then he got thrown in prison. The time between him, Joseph, having those dreams and becoming the second in command to Pharaoh in Egypt,
Right.
not good years. And they weren't short either. Well, I think it was like 13 years for Joseph.
Right.
And so you think back like, well, does it surprise you that you have some of those years? Should it surprise you? It always does. Doesn't it? Seems to always surprise you that we have those years
Yeah.
or those multitude of years or whatever it is. But I look back at those guys and my simple understanding, which is simple, but I look back at those guys and I always feel like, God needed that time to make those men who he needed them to be at this point. And there were a lot of things that happened in both those guys' lives in those years. They weren't easy and they were hard.
Yeah.
And they went through some hard things in those years.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, because I try to find ways for me to make sense of things. It's not always the best.
Right.
But in my understanding, like the only thing that can make sense of those hard times to me is, man, God had to do things in their lives to get them to the point and make them the man that he needed them to be for this stage. And if he hadn't have done those things and they hadn't gone through those hard times and they hadn't had those experiences and to overcome it and to fight through them, he could never have made them the person he needed them to be for this stage.
Right.
Because like Joseph, well, as bad as it was, when it got good for Joseph, it got real good for Joseph.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we're all going to be the second in command to the Pharaoh in Egypt. That's not what I'm saying. But that's all going to be as good for us as it was for Joseph. But I do know that we are going to experience hard times.
Yeah.
And so are all of our kids that come through our programs.
Yeah.
And so, one of the abilities that give us or the ability to respond to those situations, as I believe, and I know you're the same, is the faith that you have and the relationship that you have with the Lord and that you've given your life to Jesus and you're dependent on him and you're seeking answers from him and you're seeking guidance from him and wisdom. I'm no Bible scholar, but I know the Bible tells us if you lack wisdom, ask, I'll give it to you. Yeah. I tell people all the time, I'm sure I ask for wisdom every day because it says in there, if I ask, so I'll just keep asking.
That's right.
And so, how important is that for all of us, whether it's in the coaching profession, in your life in general, because we're all going to have those times.
Yeah.
And, we just lost a coach, Matt Young, to cancer. He fought cancer for 2 years, 2.5 years. I've known Matt since I was a kid. We grew up together. Our dads coached together. And he has kids and he has, some kids in high school and a couple, but anyway, you can't make sense of that to me. Matt Young's one of the greatest guys I've ever known. He was a tremendous man, strong Christian and completely selfless, the most positive person I would say. I can't imagine anybody more positive than him. That's why we worked so well together. He was ultra positive. I was half empty. And we lost him to cancer. And you can't explain it. I can't explain. I won't be able to explain it. I know what I believe. And I truly believe that God could have healed him. I believe that. And we pray for healing. We believe for healing. There's not a doubt in my mind. I believe God could have healed him. And he didn't. And so what was the plan? I don't have any idea. I don't think I will. So what do you fall back onto when you have those times? What do we fall back onto? And, for us, that have a Christian belief and, seeking God for wisdom and direction and believing that he has plans when things happen that we don't understand. I don't know how people get through those times that don't have that. So the value on the importance of that, how do you get through it if you don't? What do you fall back on if you don't have that?
Yeah.
And everybody's different. I get it. Everybody's different. I know for me in my life, in those times, my Christian faith and the belief that God's got a plan for me and God's got a plan in this situation, even though I don't understand it. I don't know how people get through it. Maybe they don't.
Yeah. Coach, last question. Will you share some thoughts on what helped you become the person and the coach that you are?
Yeah. I've talked about some of those things, starting with, my parents and my family. It's who you are. And I talk a lot about my dad in terms of who I am as a man. As a kid, you grow up, I was so fortunate to have a great father. And I didn't realize how fortunate I was until I got older and started to realize that not everyone has a great father. And so how blessed was I to have, Jared Moffatt, people called him Bubba, to have him in my life. And, so much of who I am is because of him. And, I say this a lot, how I go about living my life. I learned from him. I mentioned he got up and went to work every day. So do I, because that's what Dad did. Dad was loyal, sometimes to a fault. I remember I was a kid, 3 or 4 years old, and he threw his keys on the table in Malakoff, Texas, because he didn't like the way they treated the head coach. He was loyal. So I think I'm loyal because he taught me loyalty.
Yeah.
And he was honest. So I try to be honest. He was hardworking. I try to be hardworking. He was all the things that he was. I emulate and try to be because as a young kid, he was my hero. And so you can't remove that from any aspect of my life, whether it is a husband, a father, a coach, an employee, you fill in the blank, whatever it is. We talked about coaching. This goes back to who you are. So much of who I am is because of my father.
Yeah.
And, and obviously my mother as well. And then specifically in this profession, we talked about too, having guys in your life that can pour into you, and mold you in this profession. I remember when I started coaching, because my dad was a coach, I thought I knew something. I'd probably say I thought I knew a lot, right?
Probably.
I think a lot of us think that.
Yeah.
And as I got into coaching early on, I realized real fast how little I actually knew. I didn't know very much. And I didn't realize until I started doing it. And so for me, after Erie County, I was at Denton Ryan for 9 years. And those years at Denton Ryan, and there were a number of coaches there that obviously impacted me and Coach Rainey and all the guys that were on that staff, but Joey Florence and David Thomas, and Eric Loki, and Chief Blair, and these guys that were older than us, that we could learn from and emulate and try to replicate through our careers. And Coach Florence was the head coach, and David Thomas was the defensive coordinator, and both those guys coached me at Sulphur Springs. And so the value of those guys pouring into me as a coach, and I don't mind telling you, it wasn't always easy. It wasn't always easy. There were hard times there. There were hard times too there, but you can't place a value on the impact that those coaches at Denton Ryan had on me and the young coaches on that staff. And so, again, my dad and those coaches there at Denton Ryan, and, again, the coaches that you played for. I played for James Cameron at Sulphur Springs. And I think there are times that I make decisions here, and I think back to something Coach Cameron would have done. I'll never forget the time it's pouring down rain, and we practiced in the pouring down rain. This is before we had turf for the kids that don't know anything about grass foods. But there was a low spot and a bunch of puddled water, and we had a sliding contest, and Coach Cameron was first. You don't forget those things. I'm 49. You don't forget those things.
No.
But, so the impact of the coaches in my life, that I played for and that I worked with, and obviously my parents, my dad especially, obviously is who I am today.
Uh, Coach, I'm just tickled to death, as older people say. For you younger guys, I'm really happy for Coach that he was able to. He's got a wonderful wife, wonderful kids. I mean, he was able to raise those kids here in a town that it's a good place to raise your kids.
No doubt.
And he's had that other side of it with his wife and the kids, and so that's been a real blessing. And so I'm always excited every time I think of that for him and his family. Also, I don't know if I've told you this, but one of the reasons why I do this, why I'm interviewing you right now, for you to pour out there into so many coaches' lives, the wisdom and the experience that you've had is, I had an uncle who passed away. My uncle he knew about everything. He knew a little bit about everything. And I just always thought, man, you can't ask the guy a question he's not an expert on. Of course, the definition of experts, just knowing more than the person that you talk to.
Right.
And so obviously everybody's the expert to me. But anyway, when he passed away, it occurred to me that everything, all that he knew, if he didn't pass that on, you can't go ask JC a question, And right now, Coach Moffatt, he's got so much wisdom and so much to pass on to us. And it's like he said, he may not be necessarily the biggest social media guy. He'd rather, do things because it's the right thing to do, not just so we can show everybody. And I so respect that. But for me to have the opportunity right now to talk to you and to get you to pour out, that I know that's it's rare, it's a commodity, it's something very special. So I really appreciate it, Coach. I appreciate your time. This has been a Coach's Perspective with Jared Moffatt.